I'm speaking now about the only IQ test that really matters. Mankind has tried to give you test after test during your lifetime to see if you are intelligent. This is apparently very important to a lot of people. Now, the Bible told the Jews that they would seek after a sign, and I'm assuming that the average listener to this video will be predominantly a Gentile audience. Your problem is you seek after wisdom and you will go out of your way to be perceived as intelligent. And you don't like it when people think of you in the other direction. Now, this picture right here is about 100 years old. It's a picture taken in America, not some other country, but in the USA. The crazy thing about this picture is those men standing there cannot read. And they must not have much dignity left, as if they knew what the signs they are holding said about them, they'd probably punch out the guy that asked them to hold the signs. And you're probably asking, if they can't read, then who made their signs for them? The group's name was the Eugenics Society of America. Notice that this was not Nazi Germany, but good old US of A. It was this group that made those signs for the men to hold. In case your video screen is blurry and can't make out the words, that sign on the right said, "I cannot read this sign. By what right have I children?" The Eugenics Society of America was a group of individuals that worried about things. They worried about population control, and specifically, they wanted to eliminate people that they deemed unfit for living. They wanted to eliminate and kill anyone that wasn't smart. And they claimed that they were the smart people and they were the best judges of who should be allowed to reproduce. This is leftover evolutionary thinking. You have to be dumbed down with evolution teaching to get to this level of absurdity. And once again, this isn't Nazi Germany I'm talking about. This is America. You're looking at the Fitter Family Examination Building in Topeka, Kansas, 1920. And 1920 came along way before World War II, Nazi Germany. This is 1920 eugenics teaching in Georgia, not Berlin, our own American heartland. In 1920, you would go to this building and subject yourself to all kinds of tests. These tests would determine if you were a proper person, and if you passed their criteria, congratulations. You would be allowed to get married and have children. Now, I don't want to offend anyone viewing this from California, but you have to cut us Midwesterners a little slack. For years, I grew up hearing people tell jokes about California and how wild and reckless certain places are in California. For years, people in the heartland of America would roll their eyes at hearing about how crazy they behave in Hollywood or San Francisco, but this is Kansas, not Berkeley. Now, here are the 4 generations contest winners. This is where this family was deemed healthy and pure and wise by the Eugenics Society in 1923. They won the first place ribbon. Here's the first place winners for Best Couple at the State Fair in Texas, 1925. The Eugenics Society started influencing lawmakers and new laws were being passed. If the Eugenics Society deemed you unacceptable, then you would be classified as unfit. And even worse, they could classify you as feeble-minded. And if you were classified as feeble-minded, then you were forcibly sterilized. All because some nuts thought they could determine who should reproduce and who shouldn't. This part of American history doesn't get talked about, but it was very racist, and we were just as guilty of going along with these evolutionary teachings as Nazi Germany. You can imagine how certain groups of people would like to sterilize their opponents. But that only happens in Germany, right? And it was the last century. Surely we're evolving past that by now, right? But it happened over here. Here's a propaganda card trying to use cartoon drawings to scare you into submitting yourself for examination. Here a man wants to marry a beautiful woman, but she insists on seeing his eugenics certificate before she'll marry him. You had to have one of these, or your chances of getting the girl were very low. And what if the Eugenics Society didn't like your views on religion or social issues? They'd give you low marks. After all, to be labeled as intelligent, you have to think like the people evaluating you. Mankind has certain behaviors. We don't want people to think that we're dumb. In fact, we even avoid certain situations where people might get the wrong idea about us, which sometimes makes it hard to witness to people. If you stand up for the Bible and try to witness to them, you will be judged. And they may call you names, and one of those names is stupid. One time, a comedian was talking about how dumb you feel when you walk into a spider web that you didn't see. You panic and freak out and make a lot of noise, and if anybody happens to be nearby and sees you freak out, they will think you are crazy because they also didn't see the spider web. But they sure saw you go nuts, and you are now embarrassed, so you get out of there as quickly as you can. You may even try to play it cool by looking at your watch and acting like you're late for a very important meeting or something, but you leave as soon as possible. We don't like it when people think we're dumb or crazy, and sometimes you can be your own worst enemy. Let's say you are on a crowded elevator and you start to daydream. Then the elevator door opens and you step off, partially still daydreaming, but a split second later you realize that you've just gotten out on the wrong floor. What do? Well, if you're intelligent, you turn right around and try to get back on the elevator. But wait a minute. Everyone saw you get off on the wrong floor, and now you are sheepishly trying to get back in. Everyone will know that for a few seconds you were an idiot. Now, they may behave themselves and not laugh at you out loud, but they are thinking it, and you can't stand that. So you pretend that you meant to get off on that floor, and you pretend to walk away. But you don't walk too far or too fast because you are secretly waiting for those elevator doors to close so that you can press the button and take the next available elevator. Anything to avoid embarrassment. The Bible tells us, "Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil." I don't want to take this verse out of context, but doesn't it indicate that if you are wise in your own eyes, that by default, you would no longer fear the Lord? And by doing that, you end up participating in evil. You don't want to look dumb, so you puff yourself up and only do things that make you look good. So, on average, we don't witness. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things. Uh-oh. You mean we shouldn't care if Dr. So-and-so criticizes our Bible? Or our belief that it's preserved and inspired? High things, like caring about getting more and more doctorate degrees and more titles of recognition, but condescend to men of low estate. Everyone should have some friends that make less money than you do. Praise God, when Jesus was here on earth, he liked hanging around dirty, rotten, low-down scoundrels like me. He didn't come here just to hang around the high society. Be not wise in your own conceits. The Bible sure doesn't like man's puffed up wisdom. Be not wise in thine own eyes. That's biblical wisdom. I wonder if the world goes along with that. If you have opened up a textbook in the last 15 to 20 years, you will have noticed something. You've probably noticed this phrase, Homo sapien. We are immediately tipped off that they are trying to push an agenda. You say, how can you tell? Whenever they want to push a concept onto you, they either use big words or they go running to other languages. They'll tell you the word sapien means wise. They could just as easily have used the word wise, but then you could have judged whether or not it's a good thing to refer to mankind as wise. That would be referred to as being wise in our own eyes. But the world calls you wise. Why? Well, because you can make a fire. So they say mankind is wise because we've been able to make fire, but we've always been able to make fire. So, thinking like an evolutionist, they have to see some sort of improvement over that. After all, they think mankind is getting more and more civilized every day, and everything is working out just fine. So, based on absolutely nothing, except they can't wait to be wise in their own eyes, now textbooks are starting to refer to the modern man as Homo sapiens sapien. Yes, sir, we are now wise, especially now that we've relaxed our morality. The evolutionists believe that if we could just get rid of those lousy Bible believers, then our society would truly benefit and we'd be super duper wise. But the Bible predicted they would do this. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Now, the Bible tells us how to become wise the proper way. Psalm 111, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 1, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Proverbs 9, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You don't have to be the sharpest tool in the toolbox to see the obvious pattern developing here. When God gets you on this level, He can finally reason with you. Come, and now let us reason together. The most important IQ test you can pass is, did you accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, repenting of your foolish sins and asking Jesus to wash them away with His shed blood? That's the only intelligence test you ever need to pass. Speaking of intelligence, here is a man that was wise in his own eyes. His name is Captain Bucky O'Neill. This is during the Spanish-American War over 100 years ago. The Spanish showed up and they brought with them a lot of bullets. And they shot bullets at us left and right. And our soldiers took cover. Our soldiers hid behind rocks and trees. They didn't want to get shot. Everyone takes cover except Captain Bucky O'Neill. He was wise in his own eyes. His own men pleaded with him, "Get down, we don't want you to get shot." "Ah," but he said, "the Spanish have yet to make a bullet that can kill me." What he didn't know was, earlier that year, the Spanish bought all of their bullets from Germany. Now we can chuckle at the irony of this situation, but it didn't really matter where the bullets came from. Your own puffed up wisdom is perfectly capable of sending you straight to hell. A lot of people like to talk about our country returning to a Judeo-Christian heritage. All you have to do is listen to the radio and you'll hear people saying, "We need Judeo-Christian values." It sounds okay, but they never really get around to defining what that truly is. Instead, they switch over to the more popular phrase, family values. Now, family values are good, but that's not enough to turn this country around. You can totally get behind a good thing, but still miss the boat. For example, Cain and Abel. We have a knee-jerk reaction when we think about Cain, but Cain was doing a lot of good. There are a lot of people in the world that don't even think about God or doing something good, but there's Cain, attending the morning services, so to speak, and Cain has brought an offering. That's more than a lot of folks do. You can be devoted to a good thing, but still miss the boat. Some people devote their lives to peace and harmony, but they forget what Jesus said. He didn't come to bring peace, but division. Family values are great, but families divide over Jesus. And on that last and terrible day of judgment, He's really going to divide people. Family values won't cut it. You'd need a real Judeo-Christian heritage. The thing that characterizes all Orthodox Jewish belief and all Christian belief is a simple thing. Both Jews and Christians believe that when we die, we are going to be judged by a standard. If you're an Orthodox Jew, here's what you think. You think when you die, God's going to judge you by the Ten Commandments. Now, you Christians believe that when you die, you're going to be judged by Jesus Christ, a perfect man. The standard for a Christian is Jesus Christ. The standard for a Jew is the Mosaic Law. I don't think we can ever get back to a Judeo-Christian heritage because today you'd get in all kinds of trouble if you try to post the Ten Commandments, just as you get in trouble for telling people that Jesus is the only way to heaven. The idea of the Judeo-Christian heritage is that someday, somehow, somewhere, God is going to settle accounts with mankind. If you want to know what the greatest enemy this country has today is, the greatest enemy this country has is God. And as a Christian, I know that God is going to judge me and see how I stack up against a perfect man. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and there was found no place for them. Jesus is my final judge. And in this verse, we find that heaven and earth won't last. But that's not what the world thinks. 90% of the world's leaders do not believe that God is going to judge them. They don't believe they're accountable to God. If they did, they wouldn't act the way they act. Today, most people don't think that when they die, that God's going to hold them accountable for anything. We've lost that. That was the Judeo-Christian heritage. But let's get back to the part about heaven and earth not lasting. People right now don't believe that. And what better way to illustrate that by talking about the rock and roll band Kansas. Now, I don't know if you think the band Kansas is a fair representation of man's worldly wisdom, but I figure they must be a great band. After all, they let Grizzly Adams play violin for them, so they're probably just as good as any other wild analogy I've used so far. Kansas sings a song called Dust in the Wind. And in the lyrics, they use the phrase, nothing lasts forever but the earth and sky. And that is man's wisdom. It goes against the Bible. And the guy that wrote the song on the far left didn't set out to go against the Bible. It just kind of happens to us naturally. We don't ever have to work at it. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. The Bible's wisdom will be proven true in the long run. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged out of the things which were written in the books, according to their works. Now today, if you read that out loud in public, it sounds like archaic doctrine from the good old days. People don't want to hear about that. They can't handle judgment, judgment, and judgment. But I say to you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. Bible-believing Christians believe that one day God is going to judge you by a perfect man. We get that doctrine from the book of Acts. Because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man. There it is. Whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. That's going to come as quite a shock to some people. They're going to be judged up against a perfect man. And we'll see how they measure up. The world, if they bother to think about a coming judgment, thinks they're going to be judged by their works. They think God will put all of their good deeds in a scale and then measure them up against all of their bad deeds. They're in for a rude awakening. People say you can't legislate morality, but it will happen. There is coming a judgment, and a righteous judge is going to legislate over this whole earth. But that concept is almost non-existent in American preaching. Today's preachers want to impress you with their knowledge. God tells us that he knows the thoughts that enter into our mind. For I know the things that come into your mind, every one of them. Thou knowest my downsitting and mine uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. In the day when God shall judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ, according to my gospel. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord, and their works are in the dark, and they say, Who seeth us? And who knoweth us? Can any hide himself in secret places? That I shall not see him, saith the Lord. Do not I fill heaven and earth, saith the Lord? There is no darkness, nor shadow of death, where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. And said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. There's coming a judgment. Are you right with God? Why, if some of you had to face the record of what you have said or thought in the last 72 hours, some of you would sure be in a pickle. How would you like there to be huge billboards all over town that displayed every thought you ever had in your head for the last 10 years? I wouldn't want any of you to know what I've thought of in the last 3 days. I wouldn't want it broadcasted on a big screen to all of you to see. And you might say, wow, Micah, what kind of a mud hog are you? Well, I'm kind of like you are. And the reason some of you didn't think that is because you're dishonest. If they would broadcast everything I've ever said or thought in the last 10 years to all of you, there'd be people passing out listening to this video. We talk about fearing God. What we're talking about is folks that have a guilty conscience. That's us. We know we're guilty. We know we need a covering and protection. That's us. And bless God, we've got one. The reason why most people don't fear God is because they don't think there's going to be a judgment. There's a verse in Ecclesiastes that says, "For he that feareth God shall come forth of them all." What's that mean? Well, when God looks down here, he knows who fears him and who doesn't. And a general rule, brethren, is if a man fears God, he doesn't fear men. And if a man fears men, he doesn't fear God. About 14 years ago, my wife and I moved into the house we currently live in. We moved in February. Now, when you move in the winter, there's one thing you don't know for sure, and that's how good is that air conditioner going to be in the summertime? A few months later, our son was born, and all of a sudden, it's the middle of summer, and we turn on the air conditioner. After a couple of days of running the air conditioner, we realize that it's just not doing the job. It's not up to the task. So I called in an expert, an air conditioner repairman, and the next day he finally showed up. And I was very glad to see him. My wife had just had a baby, and both my wife and the baby were not happy with our hot house. There were times when it was hotter in the house than outside, so you can imagine how happy I was to finally see this guy show up. But he wasn't happy to see me. I didn't realize that at first, but as soon as he looked at me, he judged me. He must have thought I was a dumb hillbilly. But I didn't know that at first. I said, "Hey, glad to see you. My air conditioner is right in the backyard. Let's walk through the house and I'll take you right to it." And on the way to the backyard, you have to pass some of my bookcases. And I have a lot of books. And he stopped there in front of my bookcases and started looking at all of my books. And that confused me because he's here to fix my air conditioner. I didn't call him over to look at anything I had. But as he's looking at my books, he's also turning around and looking at me, then back to looking at my books. But now I think he's judging me a second time in the other direction, as if he's correcting his earlier first impression of me. Now it seems as if I'm gaining some brownie points in his eyes based upon him seeing my bookshelves. He's looking at my books and now thinking, wow, this guy must be smarter than I thought. But that's a terrible criteria to judge someone by. A lot of those books do me absolutely no good. Some of them critique and try to correct the Bible. Many of them I keep around just for giggles. Some of them are worthless. So it's not a good idea to judge someone based on how many books he has. Whenever you see a commercial for a trial lawyer, they usually stand in front of their bookshelf of law books to give the impression that they are smart. So here's this air conditioner repairman judging me wrongly 2 times. The first time he thinks I'm a slob, so therefore not important. Then a minute later, he's giving me high marks based on the large number of books. Then finally, he noticed a dictionary on my shelf and then started to speak, but in a manner that was dripping with real syrupy kind of speech when you can tell someone is putting on airs. He got to the dictionary and then asked me, "I see you have a dictionary. Tell me, do you know who wrote the dictionary?" In a split second, I realized finally what was going on. He was going to judge me based on my answer to his question. Now, if you were to ask me that question just walking down the street, "Hey, who wrote the dictionary?" I wouldn't think anything of it. But the way he's asking me, I can't describe it, except I knew he was judging me based upon my forthcoming answer. And once I realized this was all a game. I played the game right back at him. I gave him a fancy pants answer. I said, well, that depends. You could be talking about the edition put out by Noah Webster, or you could be talking about the edition put out by Merriam Webster. And he goes, ooh. He liked that. He liked that answer. I was just making that up. I don't even know if that's really right or not, but he was happy with the answer. And he starts following me out to the backyard. And he takes off the cover of my air conditioner, starts taking it all apart. And then he started in on me, lecturing. He talked about sociology, physiology, theology. And when he got to theology, he was all mixed up. He doesn't believe in heaven or hell. You Christians are a bunch of dummies. And the Bible is loaded with problems. Now, I didn't set out to witness to this guy. I just wanted my air conditioner fixed. And I had nowhere to go because it's hotter in my house than it is right there. So I stood there and delicately argued with him. I want you to know I put up a good fight. I defended the Bible. I defended Christianity. But I did it on his level, the so-called intellectual level. We did that for 2 hours. And he got embarrassed because he finally figured out he didn't know what was wrong with my air conditioner. He had no clue. And this must have embarrassed him because he wanted me to think he was intelligent. And he had to admit that to me. I don't know what to do. I've done everything I know to do. I can't fix it, he admitted finally, and then proceeded to put the parts back together like he found them. And at this point, I am dumbfounded. I was stunned. I couldn't say a thing, and it's dawning on me. I'm going to have another miserable hot night. It's not fixed, and I don't know when it will be. The whole day has been wasted, and I have to go inside and explain to my wife why we still don't have an air conditioner. And that's not going to go over too well. But the air conditioner guy got all his tools together and started walking towards his truck. And by this time, I'm feeling defeated and walking along behind him. And we get to the truck, and he climbs in, rolls down his window, leans out of the truck, and continues to lecture me on how all Christians are dummies. I realized I was wasting time, and so I really started witnessing to him on a heart level. I said, God loves you so much that he sent his perfect son to die in your place because you deserved to die on a cross. It was your sins that put him there. He never did a thing wrong, but he loved you enough to do that for you, and it's your fault. It's you that have rejected the king. It is you that are going to hell. I don't want you to go, and God doesn't want you to go. That's why he made a plan for you to get out of that. And I laid it on thick, just like I am kind of like right now. He listened for a while, and then finally he said, I don't believe a word you just said. And he turned the key, put it in reverse, backed out of my driveway, and went on down the road, headed straight for hell. Now, when you talk about hell, people will accuse you of getting all excited about the subject, and how we Christians are secretly happy about people going there, and how we Christians just love to talk about hell, which is false. When's the last time you ever heard a modern Christian talk about hell? It doesn't happen very much anymore. I don't get any pleasure telling anyone they're going to hell. But that young man is going to hell. And that was about 13 years ago or so. And I got news for you. When he gets to hell, he's not going to be able to fix their air conditioner either. And I don't mean to say that with any special fervor. I just say things matter-of-factly. His own puffed-up intelligence is sending him there. And he's going to stand before a judge, and the books are going to be opened, and his name won't be in the book of life, but on that day, he'll finally believe everything I do. But it will be too late for him. However, it's not too late for you. You can still pass the one IQ test that matters. Are you smart enough to recognize the ultimate plea bargain that is offered to you? The evidence against you is overwhelming. Take the plea bargain. Do not be wise in thine own eyes.